But
did you all get that?
We're good.
Nice. We're good. Okay, hi everyone, and thanks for joining us. We are coming to everyone basically in line of the 10th of October, which is World Mental Health Day. And this is a really good representation of the agricultural community coming in from 4 different time zones. So we're coming from sort of Africa, Southern Africa side, which is myself, and then Sharon logging in from the UK, Dave from Australia, and Michelle from the USA. And I think just collectively really wanting to share and talk about where the agricultural space is in regards to World Mental Health Day. So yeah, my name's Philip. I'm a 2022 Nuffield Scholar from Zimbabwe. And yeah, happy to log in and share what I know and what I've learned on my own journey. And yeah, Sharon, just go over to you to see, what who you are and
Yeah, thanks very much. So I'm coming at this from the UK and from 2 slightly different angles, in the fact that I am a counsellor and psychotherapist, and I'm also married to a 4th generation farmer. So I've got a foot in both camps, so to speak. So I'm here to just sort of give the UK's perspective. I'm also a 2025 Nuffield Scholar.
Yeah, Dave Woods, and I live in Queensland, Australia. I'm about 4 hours west of Brisbane. We've got a family farm there, broadacre cropping and grazing cattle. I'm also a 2025 Nuffield Scholar, and delving into mental health from the perspective of a farmer and wanting to understand why there's so much resistance in rural Australia to people seeking help, and then also just wanting to understand more about what some of the blind spots are and some of the areas that we're currently not utilising as much, and can they be effective to help people cope and deal with this.
And I'm Michelle Miller, known as the Farm Babe on social media. I'm a keynote speaker, social media content creator, author, podcast host, and advocate for global agriculture. I was a farmer for many years, grew corn and soybeans in Iowa. I'm from the USA, and raised cattle and sheep. And what started off as a blog turned into a media brand where I've traveled the world up into 70 countries on all 7 continents, and really enjoy telling the story of agriculture, where our food comes from, doing a lot of myth busting in the process. And one thing that affects everybody all around the world is mental health. So I'm a big advocate of that. I've had my own struggles and challenges, as I'm sure we all have. And so I think coming together to talk about this and realizing all the things we have in common and the places where agriculture struggles, and hopefully through this conversation we can help impact some lives in a positive way. So thank you.
That's fantastic. I think this is such a great team with so many diverse backgrounds as well. Like, it's not just the countries and the time zone. I think we got the perfect mix. We might not answer any questions, but certainly to get a message out there. And I think for the farmers and the non-farming communities, Michelle, and that's I think where you play a really strong role, is to just really understand and appreciate where your food's coming from, the strain it's taking, and the toll. And it's definitely very different all over the world. I started my own personal Nuffield journey with a certain study topic in mind, which had to do with data. And, I went to the UK. I've traveled to various countries, to Denmark and Indonesia and the States. But one of the trips to the UK, while I was chasing a data study, we had a keynote speaker who spoke about mental health. And he did one thing that just resonated, and he asked the audience to stand, and then he asked everyone to sit down if they had known someone or knew someone who had committed suicide. So, and it's a bit of a dark face, we're talking about the dark face of agriculture today, but the entire audience sat down, and that impacted me, I think, harder than I've had any other talk impact me. And being a Zimbabwean farmer, I think the Zim story should never get old. We've been through a lot. We've been through the worst economic and political hardships, I think, known to modern man, aside from what's going on in sort of Israel and Gaza. But, we're talking the last sort of 20 years or 20 years ago, and we lived it. We lived complete, ruin. And we tell a good story, like, don't mess with your farmer, because the whole country collapsed economically because of removing the farmers from the land. We broke hyperinflation records, including post-war Germany, which we went into, I don't know, it was like 706 billion% inflation per year. It's just ridiculous. The numbers were unfathomable numbers. So having come from that background, people started asking questions like, how do you, get through this? What do you do, when it's economic, and what do you do when it's affecting your pocket, or, socially, because we've lost friends and family, not just to suicide, but having immigrated. And that's where this journey for me got interesting, and mental health became, something that I really wanted to pay attention to. And I felt, being a Zimbabwean farmer, we've been through a lot. Maybe we could share something with the world, even if it's just hope, that it is going to be okay regardless, like come hell or high water. Dave, I know we've had some really interesting chats, or one really interesting chat already, and I think resonated on a lot of the questions you've got. But yeah, my message is, in my studies and research in this field, 85 out of 100,000 farmers commit suicide, whereas the closest industry next to that, there are 14 suicides to every 100,000. So, and that's a CDC study out of the States, and tells you we're 4 times higher. So there's a problem in the agricultural industry. And why is there a problem is one thing, or what do we need to do to get through it? So I'm going to stop talking there and hand that maybe over to Sharon. And I think if we could keep our routine going, and we'll open it to general discussion maybe a bit later. But that's my 10 cents on it for now.
Yeah, it's a similar picture in the UK in terms of the suicide rates. I'm quite careful about my language when it comes to suicide, because I'm aware there's still such a stigma about those who take their own lives, and I tend to shy away from the phrase committed, just because it has its origins in that sort of sinful, illegal language. So but generally, I think farming and construction are the 2 industries with the highest suicide rates in the UK. We know it's a problem. We're trying to do what we can to address it, but we're hitting certain hurdles, which are wide picture kind of policy, government, financial, that sort of thing. I mean, it always comes down to who pays for the support is probably the biggest sticking point. But also on a personal level, that sort of mentality that stops people reaching out when they're really struggling is probably our biggest hurdle in the UK, I would say. But I think it's something we really want to make a difference on. I'm the mother of 3 kids myself. I'd like them to go into agriculture if they wish, but I'm really passionate that it's an industry that's safe for them and supports them and looks after them in that process. So. Anyone?
Yeah, good. Dave, why don't you come in there?
Yeah, I think one of the I guess the components of mental health in Australia and in rural Australia, and obviously it's a huge problem in rural Australia with some really stark statistics, but some of the economic statistics that I guess I put my finger on at the start of my research. And I think in Australia it's estimated, the Productivity Commission estimated that it's costing the Australian economy sort of in the vicinity of $200 to $220 billion annually, which amounts to over $600 million a day in lost productivity. So just from an economic perspective, it's extraordinary. And I think from a Nuffield scholar perspective, Nuffield scholarships are generally about building capacity within agriculture. And I guess my perspective was, I guess to add to that, was also considering how is it that we're losing so much capacity, because we really are. And it's, I guess, the other perspective from an economic standpoint that's interesting or intriguing in Australia. I think the government spending on mental health has doubled, I think, in the last 10 years. So I think it's increased in the vicinity of 5 billion in the last 10 years. And yet, as we all know, this is a very stubborn problem, and there's lots of effort in this space to push back on this crisis. And I guess I'm just really intrigued as a farmer without I don't have a background in psychology. However, I have learnt quite a lot about psychology in the past, sorting out my own personal problems, and I've just gotten intrigued in that space and thought, this is a huge problem, and it's not just an Australian problem; it's a global problem. And I'm just, I know that we're pushing ahead on that front, and we realise, I think the awareness has increased dramatically. So we're aware that that something needs to change essentially, and I'm a bit intrigued as to what is that in that space, and that's probably my passion and my intrigue as a farmer myself, and being able to relate personally. When I struggled myself, I found it extraordinarily um, difficult to reach out and actually to go and get assistance in the first place. And I thought, what is that about our culture or our stoicism or our values? What is it about being a rural Australian that makes us so resistant when it just I mean, obviously we need to go and talk to someone and we need to do something about it, but it's beggars belief why there is so much resistance. So trying to understand that a little better is where I'm coming from. And I guess the other perspective is I think we certainly have made some impressive improvements in terms of how we're treating people. And there is certainly a significant percentage of people reaching out for help that are getting the treatment that they need, and they are making significant improvements. However, there is also people that are, effectively being treated that aren't getting the results, or are having to continue on with treatment for long periods of time. And I'm intrigued about that as well, and just curious about what are some of the other options, I suppose, that we don't really consider much. And probably the most significant one is the perspective of the unconscious level as opposed to the conscious level. That doesn't really sort of get spoken about much, and I think it's probably only maybe 5 or 10% of treatment cases where that actually has a perspective, and then also possibly a spiritual angle as well, which doesn't really get spoken about much at all. So, yeah, they're a bit. I guess there's some alternate views there, but I just sort of think we've got to start looking in some areas that we're currently not looking in order to find or to learn more about the blind spots.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you, Dave. That's really interesting. And then, Michelle, why don't you come in with you've traveled, like you said, the world and the USA perspective, because that's one we need to just know where we are too, right?
Yeah. I mean, agriculture is an international business. We're all dependent on each other's food and what we grow as an import and export world. And so I'm curious to hear more about the state of agriculture in your countries. In America right now, there is just such a huge political divide, and we're going through unprecedented times with the highest rates of production. The regulations continue to get tighter. The cost of inputs continues to rise while the price that we're paid for our goods is so low. I talked to a farm the other day, for example, he's scheduled to lose $750,000 this year. I mean, could you imagine? And like, when I'm done sharing my story, I'd love to hear from you guys as well, what it's like. Are your farmers losing money, right? And farming, as farmers know, is an up and down business. You can have a good year and you can have a bad year, but how many bad years in a row do you have to have? And then the pressure that comes on the family farm of, it's not just a job, this is our family legacy, multiple generations, where you want to raise your children. So it's so much more than just a job. And I think that's why the problems lie in agriculture. But here we are in small towns. And so when you're in a big city, you've probably heard of resources. You can walk into your neighborhood mental health center. And in rural America, we just might not have access to that. So I think raising awareness on the accessibility and different resources, which I think maybe we could share once this episode comes out, is just including some links to we don't know what we don't know. And realizing that, what is available for government assistance or your healthcare programs, or, I mean, in America, we have a mess of a healthcare system, I would say. And just the tariffs and all the pressure going on. I mean, like, I was a corn and soybean grower in Iowa for many years, and right now, I mean, China stopped buying all of our soybeans, like 25%. I mean, that's hundreds of thousands of acres that where is it going to go? And now when the prices tank below the cost of production, will we ever get China back as a market? And so people listening to this, farmers are probably going, yeah, yeah, it really sucks. And it's okay to not be okay because we all go through struggles. So talking about it, I mean, even myself, I think the more you talk about it, I mean, I've thought about, like I've had times where I was really dark and, not that I wasn't going to act on suicide, but it definitely, the thoughts were there to the point where I had to get a mental health counselor and his name's Michael. He's been with me for 4 years. My therapist is phenomenal, saved my life. Maybe literally, figuratively, but you're right there and you don't want to cross that line of actually acting on it, right? But if you can control your mind enough to say, okay, like I'm not okay right now, like you change as a person, you become angry or so depressed or so sad that you can't get out of bed. Look, that's normal. Like everybody struggles with their mental health. And to say, like, here are some resources and to talk about it. Like I once saw a sign that said, relax. We're all crazy. It's not a competition. And I was like, but everybody goes through it. And so just by saying, hey, you're struggling, so am I, so is he, so is she. To your point, Philip, like, who here knows of somebody that's been affected by suicide? Having every person in the room sit down. Yeah, it's real. And so, like farmers are more susceptible to it, and raising awareness and talking to your elected officials and your politicians and your leaders and realizing what's there. And this is a real problem. And if we don't have farmers, we don't have everything, from the clothes on your back to the food on your plate to the drinks in your cup. It all comes from a farm. And in North America, farmers are 1.5% of the population. 1.5% feeding 100%. And so keeping the communication lines open, keeping policy under control, understanding imports and exports and how we all need to rely on each other and we all need to strengthen the mental health of our agricultural community, which ultimately has a ripple effect all around the world.
Yeah, I love the fact that you bring policy into the conversation because a lot of where people are struggling is policy based. Michelle, you're actually logging in from Mount Rushmore, so I don't know if this is a really good place for you to show us your presidents behind you if they're there.
Well, Donald Trump wants to be on it, of course. I'm like,
all the
no.
birds are likely going to sit on that one. But
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, it's a beautiful day here today with some really nice weather, but that also really impacts mental health. Like, get outside, feel the sunshine, like it all has an impact. And so yeah, I like to be out in nature as much as I can and fill your soul with some good energy and some good thoughts. And that's going for regular walks, having a good therapist, having a good support system, and knowing who you can lean on. And I think sometimes too, people tend to lean on their friends and family a lot, which is really good and important. But having a professional, Sharon, tell us a little bit more about what you do as a professional in this space, and how that's different from maybe relying on your immediate friends and family circle.
Oh yeah, so I work one-on-one with people in our rural community. I actually manage a practice where there's 14 of us. So no matter what the issue that someone approaches our practice with, there's someone here who has that as a special interest. But I do a lot of work with farmers, members of farming families, as well as other members of the rural community that aren't as involved with agriculture. I think some of the things that are the really key differences, we know that the farming community is widespread, but it's small, right? So everyone knows everyone, and there's lots of links between farming families, and there's lots of interrelated competitiveness and as well as friendship. So there's a worry that if they share with friends or with family that word will spread, and what will that do to, Joe down the road, he's really struggling, like, and it's that kind of gossip nature that kind of goes with farming. Everyone knows everyone's business, right? Which can be difficult when you're struggling, and it's one of the things that stops people talking. on the one hand, they're really keen to talk to someone they trust, which is great. But also at the same time, it's like, but, you know, what if they tell so-and-so, or what if I lose my contract, or especially if there's a competitive edge, you know, what if the guy down the road, he's going to go to my supply, to my customers and say, like, don't trust him, he's not on the ball. So there's that element that makes talking to friends and family really risky. I also think, so I wrote a paper on the mental health of farm wives because I felt they were particularly underrepresented in the research. And what I found as a result of that was you will always turn to the person closest to you with your mental health difficulties, whether that's for support or to take it out on them. And that can have a negative impact on those closest family members, whether that's a spouse or parent or child or whatever. So and those that feel they're supporting their farmer, they can see their farmer is struggling, they tend to take more of that on themselves, so that they might be struggling with the same reasons. Like you say, work is home and family is everything. And so if one of you is feeling the financial pinch on the farm, then the whole household is feeling the financial pinch, plus we're living in a cost of living crisis. So you're worried about that stuff anyway, and then you're supporting someone who you can tell is teetering on the edge because of the stuff that's going on. And so you try not to burden them with your stuff. So you end up with two people trying not to talk to each other because they don't want to overburden someone who's already burdened. And then that becomes an additional strain, and it can have a really sort of negative ripple effect. So those are the reasons why talking to a professional is useful. But I think also that step away from the situation, you know, we can get a bit echoey chambering in agriculture because everyone is in the same thing, particularly, you know, if it's a political thing or a climate thing, you know, everyone is feeling it. And so you kind of think you can get caught up in the, well, I don't want to talk to him, he's actually got it worse than me, because at least I've got, you know, something like that. And it stops you again from kind of reaching out. So talking to someone who is a step back, like not completely ignorant, that's a different issue, you know, but like a step back from that space, who can just challenge your thinking a little bit, sort of turn those internal messages around a bit with you, can be really beneficial. The problem we have in the UK is that we have a National Health Service, which is great, but is stretched, really stretched. And so if you approach your GP, your general practitioner, your doctor, which you can get to relatively easily in rural areas, they will refer you, but the waiting list is long. It can be, you know, 6-8 months for some areas. If you've got a child or adolescent with mental health issues, it can be up to 2 years. So that can have a really negative effect. And then we have the private sector, but not many people can afford to pay for that, especially when they're in financial crisis. So actually the thing that picks up the gap in between for our agricultural industry is the charities, and there's lots of really good charities doing really great work, which is farmer focused and that sort of thing. But again, it's who pays for it. You know, that we're in a cost of living crisis. We're reliant on donations from well-meaning individuals, and that can be tricky.
Yeah, it's such a good conversation to have, Sharon, and it's lovely to have you on the call with this background. You know, I really wanted the message this year on World Mental Health Day to come across. Why don't we change our own narrative a little bit, and instead of like trying to encourage people to speak up or to look for help, why don't we start learning how to lead conversations? Because that's something, you know, if you're mentally fit or mentally strong, that's really good. And I think this message needs to go to those, is when you're with a friend and you're one-on-one, you know, before you become strong, you have to become vulnerable. Why don't you lead the conversation? I can start sharing about, and we've all just done it today, you shared a little bit, we've had our own mental struggles, right? Like that's a really nice space for someone to start feeling comfortable. So you lead it. Instead of saying, guys, let's stand up and let's share, let's talk to everyone else who isn't struggling and say, let's learn to lead vulnerable conversations, I think would be, for me, such a really strong message for this year. And Dave, I wanted to go back to some of the stuff you'd mentioned as well, and Sharon. Like I also really believe that, you know, the issues around mental health are related back to resilience, and that's where the Unstoppable initiative became like really interesting, because it focuses on resilience and what does your resilience toolbox look like. And it's the little things, so I'll share, I went through a really dark place as well, and the thing that hurt me the most was this guy, the phone. And everything I started looking at was bringing up really bad memories, traumatic memories, and I started like getting sucked into this vortex. And what is nice is you can change the algorithms, like, and if that's the only message that gets out today, that's also good, right? You can control the algorithms that come on your phone. You just got to, and I'll just give the tip now, find a video you like. I used Whose Line Is It Anyway, sort of British, this is an American comedy actually. Whose Line Is It Anyway? And I would write five word comments on every video that came through, and eventually everything started coming through, and I changed the algorithms on my phone, and that made a big difference. And I think there's lots of other things we can do, but that's just an example. So we need to get messages out there to people, lead people in vulnerable conversations, and then what do you need to do when it's like the walls are closing in? Because can you do much about policy? Like Michelle said, no, you can't, and shit might hit the fan. You might lose your farm. You might go bust, but what the message at the end of the day needs to be, it's going to be okay. Have you got a good why? Is your why strong? Have you got a focus? And you're going to get through it, man. Like it's not the end of the world. Like it's life, and we've got to go through these ups and downs. Like suicide isn't the answer. So Dave, I'm seeing you wanting to come in. Yes, I'll hand that back to you.
Yeah, thanks. It's I think just to follow on from your point there about building resilience, I agree. I think that is a really important component of it. And talking about mental health from the perspective of empowerment, how to I guess get people to lead themselves, through a difficult time. But we often talk about, I guess treatment options and what needs to happen. I guess with almost with the perspective of how do we fix, this dysfunction or this broken sort of model. And I think that conversation is, can sort of be. I mean, it's a vulnerable conversation, and it's one that needs to happen. But I think sometimes the empowerment part could also be a part of the conversation, to, I guess, to help people realize that, taking steps to lead yourself and to build empowerment can create that really strong foundation of resilience. And also, I think to Sharon's point before about, relationships and farmers' wives, it's so often the case in Australia where someone has taken action because of the conversations they're having with their wife, and they're sharing a vulnerable conversation, a difficult conversation. But your wife or your partner, either the husband or the wife, might be the first person that you have the conversation with, and then often can encourage someone to take the first step and to go and seek counselling, or therapy. And that's a really important point too, I think, because in Australia we're seeing some interesting examples of I think the same kind of principle happening in peer networks. And there's some interesting things happening in that space. And I think Steph Trethewey with Motherland has created a very interesting model in that space, helping isolated rural mums navigate, the complexities and the challenges and the mental health battles that come with raising children in isolated environments. And it's been very powerful, that model, because I think it's largely anonymous, and there's something about a small group of like-minded people with similar backgrounds. There's something empowering about that in terms of them being able to share vulnerable conversations. We all have the concern in a small area or a rural town that someone's going to judge us or find out about what's going on. But if there's a sense of anonymity, that can really help, I think. And then just being able to talk to people you can relate to, and just being able to talk about how you're feeling is a really important first step, and I think a powerful model for being able to get people started and get them where they need to be, to get to a counsellor or a therapist. So that's really interesting, from breaking down the resistance, I think. And also another example in Australia that's been intriguing is Shannon Wan with Sober in the Country, dealing with alcohol addiction, and obviously mental health is very closely linked to alcohol addiction. Australia has a huge problem with alcohol overconsumption and addiction. And Shanna's model, similar to Steph's model with Motherland, but an online group of peers whereby they aren't recommending one treatment modality. It's very open, and they're allowing people to look across the range of what are the options, and what they encourage people to share what worked for them, but not in a from a perspective of preaching the one true way. It's very open, and allowing people to say, hey, look, this is what happened for me, and this is what worked for me. May not work for you, but this is how I found some significant breakthroughs personally. So that's an important message as well, because we're all different. We've all got our own nuances, and what works for me may not work as well for you. But I think it's really important to help people understand that there is a range of different options in front of you. There's some key principles and themes that we need to follow. But what are the options? And in those peer networks, there's just opportunity to be able to understand more about them and just break down that fear of vulnerability, and help people realize that there's some very strong people that are okay with vulnerability. So, yeah, I guess to your point, PJ, that speaking about vulnerability and reframing it as a powerful process in order to lead yourself and to build empowerment. Vulnerability is a key part of that. I think it would be helpful for us to reframe and help people understand that vulnerability is an important part of the process.
Yeah, and I love that. And Michelle said it, and I say it all the time. It's okay not to be okay, like so, and that's there, that there's too. Sorry if this is a trigger warning, but I've done tough too. I shot my first charging lion when I was 16 years old, right? Like I've been on my own since a young teenager, and I've done everything that you could say is tough, and I don't believe I am tough, and it's okay. Like sometimes you can just bring it back down and really go into the trenches. So, but I am cognizant we're probably going to start rolling this out, which will probably take another 20 minutes to close this conversation with you. Absolutely incredible people. But I think, Michelle, if you were to give a message out, today, and again, like it's World Mental Health Day, it's not agricultural mental health day. We're talking about the world, we're representing the agricultural community today. I love your social media, that the fact that it extends much further than the agricultural community. So it would be really nice to know, what's your message today to the world, or to the people who are going to listen to these videos, and what can we sort of push out there?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. And I wanted to piggyback off of Dave's point of, what works for one person might not work for another person. And so one of the big messages I would share with people is don't ever give up. If you try something and you think, therapy is a great example, because I also think a lot of people can be very like prideful, or like, oh, the therapy, like, no, like, they're too macho for it or something, vulnerability is really important. And I would like to encourage people to remember how you're going to feel on the other side of that pain. It can be a short-term pain for a long-term gain. And once you do, regain control of your happiness and your mental health and all of the things, and you come out on the other side of it, it is absolutely euphoric. And you've probably been there or know somebody who has, where you've overcome the struggle and you didn't let it bring you down, and you realize, what can I do? And, even with therapy, if therapy and counseling is an option for you, which I believe it should be for everybody, and if it's not, find out a local resource, because there are a lot of resources out there. We just don't know what we don't know. So I think sharing resources that can help people all around the world is really key. But if you try a therapist and they don't help you, try a different one. Therapists are kind of like friendships or any type of relationship. You're gonna jive better with somebody else. And I had to go through probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 different therapists before I finally found my person. And the way that we manage our feelings, you know, some people appreciate tough love. Some people appreciate, like my current therapist, Michael, like I said, he's been with me for 4 years. He is my rock. I've been dealing with a ton of health issues over the past year or two. And I don't know what I'd do without him some days, because there are days that you're just like, when, like I struggle with chronic back pain, and it's just like, there are days that you're just like, oh my God, like physical pain quickly transpires into emotional and mental pain. But if you can control this, you can control a lot. And so, you know, once you find that therapist that is like, aha, like, why do I like this one the best? Is because he's very encouraging. And when I leave my sessions, I feel very empowered, and I feel, like I can do this. But some people, they deal with a different type of personality that makes them help. It's kind of like in the workplace. Some people are motivated by money. Some are motivated by, you know, success or moving up the ladder, recognition, job promotions. You know, there's a number of different things that will inspire you to be a better person. And it's the same with your mental health. And so just remember that when you're really going through the dark times, this is not the end. It will never and should never be the end of you. People love you and care about you. I really want to create like a t-shirt or a bumper sticker or something that says like eulogize the living, because, you know, whenever somebody dies, you know, you see these outpours of kindness and love towards the person. Oh, you know, Tim was the best guy ever. We loved him so much. He could light up a room and make everybody laugh. Like, but did you ever tell Tim that? Like, tell your friends and family you love that. Make it awkward. Say it so freaking much to the point where it's just like, you know, people love you. Like, they really do. Even when you think like, oh, I'm unlovable, I'm down, my career's, you know, I'm going to lose my farm, my family's going to hate me. I promise you, your family doesn't hate you. Like, it might feel that way sometime, but there are people out there for everybody that really care. And so, you know, it's okay to lean on people and to like, just tell people that you're there, like offer to be a voice and a support system. And there's a number of ways. Find, you know, just being out in nature, right? Like, this is good for the soul. And there's just so many ways. And it's just, there's a lot of options to help you get through it. That would be my take home message for people.
It's a beautiful message. I love it. And eulogize like the living is great. So I'm going to empathize with your back pain, though. I'm actually currently in quite a lot of pain. I'm lining up for my 3rd spinal surgery before the age of 40. I've got to do 2 total disc replacements in my neck. So that was quite a tough blow, actually.
The worst. I'm sorry. I feel your pain. Literally, it's the worst.
It's okay, yeah, but you know, like, I've lived with back pain my whole life. I'm tall, I'm 6'5", you know, so this is normal. But having this like complete nerve breakdown in the arm and just disintegration, it's been a little bit like traumatic as well. Like, you're like, I'm not even 40 yet and I'm going for my 3rd back surgery. Like, what am I going to look like when I'm 60? So I get it, you know, but honestly, just sitting here, and I love your message, and it's exactly that. Like, you just got to take things on the chin where you need to. You know, whatever the world is going to throw at you, you're fine. You know, you're good and you got this, and you got the people around you. And I think that's such a big one that you said, Michelle, and I'm really going to echo that as my message as well. Is look at the people around you. They love you, and they want you there. You know, and they need you. They don't just want you there. They freaking need you there. So I'm going to echo that, and I think I'm going to pass the same question on to Sharon, and then Sharon, if you would pass that baton on to Dave, and then we could probably look at wrapping this call up. So Sharon, what's your message for World Mental Health Day, coming from the agricultural community? And yeah.
Oh man, I think if there was one right answer to solve the issue, we'd have done it already. So I think it's so complicated, and it's really hard to kind of make it into a succinct point. I think if you think someone you love or someone you know is in crisis, ask them. It is always better to ask. You never want to be in the situation where you're thinking, oh, I wish I said something. But at the same time, you know, you don't have to take the whole responsibility on for that. It can just be sitting alongside them, helping them find the support from somewhere else that they need. It doesn't have to mean that that's going to be you, but I think it's really important to ask the question. I think if you're the one in crisis, don't die of embarrassment. Like ask for help, seek it from somewhere. You know, there's whoever you feel comfortable talking to, whether it is family, whether it's a friend, whether it's a priest, whether it's a stranger, whether it's a helpline. Talking to someone is always better than talking to no one. And when you mention resilience, you know, we're good at future proofing in agriculture. You know, we store feed for the winter. We try and be sort of drought resistant by, in the good years, planning for the times when we know it's not going to be in the future. I think we like to kid ourselves that maybe we're never going to struggle on this stuff if we've been okay. But if you're okay, then put in those systems that will get you through the tough times. You know, do the work whilst you're well or whilst you're doing good, that will then allow you to either help someone else who's struggling or help yourself if you're struggling later down the line. Because at the end of the day, if you end up never having to struggle with that stuff, then it's still a win, right? But you know, it's kind of that preparedness and not kind of putting your fingers in your ears and going, it won't happen to me. You know, it's kind of just let's look at when you're feeling, even if it's the days that you're feeling better than others, you know, rather than it's a good period of life, do what you can in those days to prepare you for, or to see you through the darker days, I think. Dave?
Well said.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think I guess I guess the key to finish on from my perspective is to keep the faith. I think that's really important, and I think as with most problems that that we face in life and in business, you know, it really is just a case of um, finding more tools to be able to use to solve the problem. And you know, I guess it's a little bit like solving a jigsaw puzzle of sorts. And I think it's really important and not often spoken about that these conditions, it is possible to transcend them entirely. I believe that's been my own personal experience, but I think it is certainly possible, and I think that needs to be a part of the conversation. And if we're solving a jigsaw puzzle and we can't find some of the pieces, you know, it's very difficult to put together. So, you know, we need these tools to be able to understand what the principles and themes are in order to be able to put the puzzle together. And you know, if we're solving a puzzle, we'll start with the corner pieces and then we work our way in from the outside and we look for, you know, for colors, similar colors, and they're all akin to the tools that we can utilize in mental health. So, yeah, I understand it's a very difficult process initially, but as you gather more and more tools, I think that generates hope and curiosity and intrigue. And yeah, I think the intrigue and the curiosity is the thing that leads you to find more and more tools, and you start putting the puzzle together, you know, with more and more enthusiasm. So yeah, I think that's probably my key message, and always keep the faith. There's always a way out of these situations, always.
Oh, that's brilliant. So I think we'll wrap this one up. Guys, thank you so much. I mean, this is 4 time zones. You get the message from all over the world. And yeah, Michelle, let's see if Sydney manages to make, yeah, even if it's a short video, just with a bit of music and showing our faces. Yeah, it's nice to
Sounds
just
good.
show that we're here and we're going. And guys, I really appreciate it. This means the world to me. And I think you know, I tell everyone with the work we do, again, mentioning Unstoppable, like if we spend 10 years and we use, you know, there's hundreds and thousands of conversations and collaborations and we save one life, like that's worth it, you know, like it's all
Absolutely.
been worth it. And that's value on life, right? So, Sharon, you could probably stop recording. And then, guys, if you wanted to stay on and keep talking, we can absolutely do that. Like, I don't need to dictate that at all.